Well, again, thank you all for being here. I'm Harold Mock, Director of Georgia College's Leadership Programs. It's my pleasure to welcome you to our Usery Forum on Leadership. This afternoon, we have the pleasure of hosting Judge Peggy Walker. Before we begin our forum, I must say that this event is being recorded. By participating in this program, you are consenting to being recorded. If you would prefer to view the recording instead of participating, please leave this meeting and email leadership.programs@gcsu.edu. We are honored to welcome Judge Peggy Walker to Milledgeville and back to Georgia College. Catherine Smith, our Usery Fellow, will introduce Judge Walker momentarily, but allow me briefly to say a few words about this event. The Usery Forum on Leadership is Georgia College's presentation discussion series on leadership for the public good. The forum honors the memory of the 15th U.S. Secretary of Labor, W.J. Usery, Jr. The series is made possible by the generosity of Mr. and Mrs. Melvin and Elise Usery. This is Constitution Week. At Georgia College and across the United States, we celebrate the document and the ideas that allow us to debate and disagree and to hold a minority view, always in the knowledge that what unites us is greater than what divides us. Secretary Usery had a unique ability to bring people together in the name of ideas and causes bigger than themselves. He was a master of helping others to find common ground. He served across 5 presidential administrations: Kennedy, Johnson, Nixon, Ford, and Reagan, each of whom came to rely on his unique ability to bring people together. And he accomplished that by helping to inspire shared visions, by helping people to see a brighter future by what they could achieve together. And that's precisely what we honor and celebrate here this evening, embodied in our distinguished presenter, Judge Walker. I'd like to acknowledge a few of our special guests who are with us this afternoon. Mr. and Mrs. Melvin and Elise Usery, our benefactors who are joining us virtually. Member of our Leadership Advisory Board, Colonel Tom Torrance. Mentors in our Georgia Education Mentorship Program, including Dr. Baru Sethna and Tracy Plott. Thank you for joining us virtually. Mrs. Jane Kidd, who is our Alex Gregory Distinguished Fellow and Leader in Residence, who will join me on the stage momentarily. It's also a joy to host today's forum alongside and with the John E. Sahlstrom Honors College. Dr. Sahlstrom has joined us virtually, and we're glad, Dr. Sahlstrom, that you are with us. And the Honors College, of course, is represented this evening by Dean Brian Newsom, and who is the Dean of the John E. Sahlstrom Honors College, and Miss Anna Whiteside, who is the Assistant Director. So thank you, Brian, thank you, Anna, for allowing us to host this event with you. We're joined by guests online, including alumni from across Georgia and perhaps from across the country. So to our guests online, and particularly our Georgia College alumni, I hope that this event with Judge Walker reminds you of what makes this university so special, that we have the opportunity to ask and answer big questions and to share in a commitment to something that is greater than ourselves. We hope to host you on campus in person soon. Most of all, to our students, I'm glad that you all are here. It's a great joy to me that you are going to learn about leadership from someone who has proven such a wonderful leader in her profession and in service to our state and our country. Before we go any further, I'd like you to pull out your cell phones, and as you are silencing them, please follow us at Lead Creatively. And anything you hear tonight that you would like to put onto social media, use the hashtag for the public good. So go ahead and pull out your cell phones and follow us at Lead Creatively, and then silence them. With that said, one of the most important elements of these events is, of course, that we hear from you, our students and our guests. So as Judge Walker is sharing ideas with us this afternoon, consider what questions you may have for her that you would like to put to her. I encourage you to shape our conversation by asking good questions of Judge Walker. There are very few ideas that we will discuss here this afternoon that would not be enriched by regularly reading the newspaper and engaging with informed debate from those with whom you agree and disagree. I want to remind you all, especially our Georgia College students, that Georgia College has provided you with a free subscription to the New York Times. In partnership with the American Democracy Project and sponsored by the Office of the Provost, it is only sitting there waiting for you to activate it. So if you would like, you can go to accessnyt.com and select Georgia College from the drop-down. You can do that right now. Go to accessnyt.com, select Georgia College, and get signed in so that you can activate your free subscription to the New York Times. In addition to the New York Times, I'll also remind you that Russell Library maintains subscriptions to dozens of newspapers and magazines. Now is the time in your life to develop a healthy news diet. And just about all of those are sitting in the floor when you walk into my office. So if you would like to practice reading the newspaper or reading one of these periodicals together, all you have to do is show up at my office and we'll pick something off the floor and we will read it together. That is my promise to you. I would love to help you develop a habit of reading the newspaper. I see nobody's going to take me up on that. I saw every eyeball in the room look away. With that, again, thank you for joining us. I would now like to welcome Catherine Smith, Georgia College's Student Usery Fellow, to introduce Judge Walker.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to introduce the Honorable Peggy Walker. Senior Judge Peggy H. Walker served as the Chief Juvenile Court Judge in Douglas County from 1998 to 2019. She graduated from Georgia College with honors, earning a Bachelor of Arts degree in Political Science and Education. She attended Georgia State University and earned her master's degree in education and a Juris Doctorate of Law with honors. Walker served as president of the National Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges in 2015. She was a Harris Fellow of the 0 to 3 class of 2005 and a Senior Fellow at Emory University in 2008. She served as chair of the Georgia Commission on Family Violence for 2 years and served 6 years on the commission, leading the effort to draft a state plan to end domestic violence. She currently serves on the Advisory Group for Safe Babies, Infant and Toddler Courts for the state of Georgia. Walker received the Commission's Gender Justice Award in 2015, a Big Voice for Children Award from Voices for Children in 2016, Emory University's Epic Award for Unsung Devotion for Those Most in Need in 2016, and the Georgia Supreme Court's Amicus Curiae Award in 2018. She was named one of the top 100 most influential graduates of Georgia College, and additionally received the Ethel Ray Mozo Stewart Alumni Community Service Award. Judge Walker served on child fatality review from 2012 to 2021. She now serves as a senior judge for the juvenile courts of the state of Georgia. Walker recently completed a 90-day volunteer assignment with the American Bar Association in the Republic of Georgia. She shadowed judges to support the judiciary in the Republic of Georgia with implementation of the Rights of Children Code. Please join me in welcoming the Honorable Peggy Walker to Georgia College.
Well, Judge Walker, thank you for being with us. To get us started, we'd like to maybe just hear a little bit about your biography. We heard your official biography, but I wonder if you could tell us a little bit more of your story. Help us fill in the gaps between those many distinguished moments in your career.
I was born in McDowell County, West Virginia, and if you don't know anything about the Appalachian Mountains, it's actually the poorest region in the United States. My parents lived there for a number of years, and then we had the opportunity to relocate to Atlanta, and we moved to Southwest Atlanta. My mother was a reading teacher, and she taught at a Title I school, and she believed that if a child can learn to read, then that child has the opportunity to escape poverty. And that was something that was extremely important to her. The way that we were raised was with the expectation that we would go to college. It never once occurred to me that I would have the right or the ability to say that I didn't want to go to school. But to me, education was a wonderful, wonderful opportunity. And coming to Georgia College was life-changing because I was able to join this campus in the first of the honors programs. I got what I needed. I became an educator. I taught school in Clayton County. I taught school in Fulton County, went to law school. But when I graduated from law school, I had a small child with an expectation that I was going to work 80 hours a week for a firm, and that was not realistic because it is important to strike a balance between work and family. I took a job clerking for a judge. I enjoyed raising my son. He now has 5 children, and that's a lot of fun. When I finished my internship with the judge, the 2-year service, I began my own law firm, and I went to the juvenile court as a volunteer. It was never an intended career. It was a way for me to use my education. But it turned out that that was where my talents were, and that is basically how I began my career in the juvenile court, is as a volunteer.
So a lot of our students who are here this evening, I think, aren't sure about what's going to come next. They may have some vague ideas about what will come next, but you described your time in college as eye-opening and life-changing, and I wonder, how did you discern, maybe when you were this age, what that pathway was going to look like?
Well, when I was your age, I was going to work for the State Department and become a spy, and you just heard my biography. Didn't turn out that way. I did not have a talent for language. I loved French. I loved Dr. Guiton. But my anxiety dream is still to go to the lab, to take my exam, listen to the tapes over and over again, and not understand a single word of French. So that absence of that language skill led me to think about, well, what do I really love and what do I really want to do? I had the opportunity to join an excellent political science department. And my love of policy and my belief that I would do foreign policy led me to that path. And you are correct, I would certainly join you in your office and reading all of those newspapers because I was absolutely fascinated by foreign policy. I began working at the local level, doing local policy. Then I had the opportunity to do state policy and then national policy. And this summer I fulfilled my dream of being able to do international policy. So my point is this: do what you love, do what your talents bring you to do, and follow your passions. Because if you're passionate about something, it doesn't feel like work and you're able to give it 100%, you're able to do your best. And don't be wedded to your plans. Every time I make a plan, it blows up. I finally learned that what you look for is opportunities, relationships, and what fits with what your dream for your life is and what your talents are in making choices about your career.
Judge, I was going to ask you about your most recent experience. You just mentioned your international policy. Tell us about your trip to Georgia and what you did there.
Well, the American Bar Association was very actively recruiting me to go to the Republic of Georgia. A friend of mine had applied for the job. He did not have enough years' experience as a judge to go, And so the ABA actively recruited me. The first year I said, no, I just can't pick up and leave home for 3 months in 2 weeks. I just can't do that. But they did recruit me for the next group, and I left on May 1st and stayed for 90 days. What my job was to shadow judges and to work with them on implementation of the Rights of Children Code that has been adopted in the Republic of Georgia, but has yet to be implemented fully. And what they were interested in is, how do we protect rights of children? How do we have children testify? How do we determine what the best interests are for children in making custody decisions? So it was a wonderful opportunity, except my timing, and again, this has to do with how life really is. My timing was really bad. In April, the State Department sanctioned 4 Republic of Georgia judges for corruption. You can imagine how well received I was by the judiciary when I got there. But the one thing that you learn in life is to overcome adversity. And yes, it was a hostile situation. Yes, it was a hostile environment. But I'm me. I go in, I work the room, I meet the people, I talk to the people, I talk to them about their children and their families. I ask them questions. And before long, I had made friends with 4 of the 5 judges in the city of Kataisi State Court. I then was able to go and work with some of the judges in the regions. I was able to teach judges throughout the Republic of Georgia virtually and in person. And I'm very excited to say that I'm hosting, along with the American Bar Association, the East-West Institute, and the USAID, what is called the Rule of Law program, which is the program that I was a part of in the Republic of Georgia, in bringing a group of judges from the Republic of Georgia to Atlanta. They arrive on Saturday. We sightsee on Sunday. Monday, they have the opportunity to observe court in Fulton County. On Tuesday, they'll go to a child advocacy center and then have a panel discussion with some of our state leaders. And then Wednesday, I will take them to my home county of Douglas County, Georgia, and they'll get to observe not only the juvenile court, but also the superior court and state courts and the magistrate court. So it has been a truly wonderful experience to live in another country for an extended period of time, to experience that culture, to have adventures in not knowing what food you might have ordered, in not having a car, not having elevators, also in learning that you can be at home and make friends anywhere. The way that we were treated was absolutely amazing. We never once felt that we were among strangers. They were so incredibly good to us, and it was a wonderful experience.
I was going to say, not all of us are going to end up being lawyers or even judges. As a former CASA worker, what do you think about the relationship of children's advocates in the court and how that helps or hinders or aids the judge in this situation in a juvenile court?
For those of you that are not familiar with what Jane is talking about, it's court-appointed special advocates. And this organization was founded, I want to say 50, 60 years ago, to make sure that children had a voice in court. What we know from the research is that when children feel that they have been heard by the court, even if they don't get what they want, they will have better outcomes. Children who are removed from their families, placed in foster care, typically have someone appointed in a role as what's called a guardian ad litem. That guardian ad litem can be an attorney, it can be a social worker, but more often than not throughout the United States, it's a volunteer. For those of you that have an interest in children, for those of you that have an interest in courts, this is a wonderful service opportunity. It supports the courts in ways beyond what you can imagine. First of all, the children have a one-on-one relationship, and the CASA does not change from the beginning of the case to the end of the case. The problem is that we have changes in caseworkers frequently. We have changes in counselors frequently. We have changes in attorney representation frequently. But stability comes from having one family, one judge, and a CASA volunteer that's there from the beginning to the ending. Many of our CASA volunteers stay in touch with the children that they've served and follow them even into adulthood and help mentor them. CASAs also can speak to our representatives, to our county government, to our federal representatives, because how the money gets dispersed matters to our families. Our children don't have the opportunities to advocate for themselves, but our CASAs can. They can advocate in the courtroom. They can advocate at the schools, because I always appoint the CASA when a child has special education needs to be the surrogate parent. They can advocate for the child with local government, for the courts to have and the DFACs to have the funding they need, for state to provide DFACs with what they need, and at the federal level on how our captive monies get used. So CASAs have a very vital role, and it is a volunteer opportunity, and you have a very strong program here in Baldwin County.
Thank you.
Across most of your career, you focused in family and on the protection of children, correct?
Yes.
And I wonder, that I can imagine can be a very difficult area to practice in. You see maybe difficult situations and a lot of good that perhaps could be done. And I wonder what draws you to that maybe particularly challenging area, or maybe I've got it wrong and it's actually a blessing. Can you help to explain that?
Well, I've already referred to the first thing that took me to this work, was my mother believing that every child had the right and the ability to learn to read, and that was a fundamental thing that had to be stressed. But the second piece of this is when I was in law school, I actually had an opportunity to be an intern in the district attorney's office in DeKalb County. My job was to prepare victims of sexual assault and child victims of crimes to testify. And what I learned about the system and the re-victimization of children and adults who experience sexual crimes was unacceptable to me. I knew we could do a better job, and it ignited a passion in me to advocate for better use of science in our practices within the law. We know so much about child development. We know so much about trauma. But how do we apply it where we are not doing more harm? Unfortunately, for many years, sexual victims were attacked for their individual lifestyles, for their appearances, for being in the wrong place at the wrong time, and making it difficult to prosecute those cases. We have since put in rape shield laws and other protections around victims to make it less traumatizing, victim services to be more supporting. And then with children, we've got child advocacy centers so that we don't have to keep asking the same questions over and over and over again. But that passion is deeply rooted in my experiences as a child and also in my experiences in law school.
I'm going to widen the scope here and talk about our Constitution, U.S. Constitution, since it's Constitution Week. And I'm very interested in your perspective about precedent. What does precedent mean in today's courts, and what was it meant to mean back in the day when you and I were growing up, and how things have changed, and what's the importance of knowing what the precedent was before a certain law was put into place?
Well, that is a great question because precedent is part of a common law system, and I've just spent the last 3 months in the civil system where they're not accustomed to that. In the civil system, everything is statutory. The statutes are very, very long, very, very complex, and there really is no flexibility. You can only do what is exactly prescribed in the statutory scheme. But in common law, we have much broader discretion as judicial officers, because not only do we have a statutory framework, but our statutory framework tends to be more general. And then we have precedent, which is prior decisions, prior cases, that gives us more specifics to be able to match our facts and to give us much more flexibility. In my opinion, having experienced both systems, it's easier when you have discretion, it's easier when you have flexibility, it's easier to reach a fair and just result. But when precedence is ignored and when it is overturned without good, sound constitutional reasoning, it puts our democracy at risk because we no longer have that balance, we no longer have that expectation, and we can't give good advice because we don't know what is likely to happen given the facts and the circumstances when we are being the legal advocates. So I want to emphasize how incredibly important it is to have that balance of power, to respect not only our statutory framework, but our framework of case law and precedents that has brought us through many, many decades and now into the 3rd century of a just and fair opportunity to resolve differences through our judicial system.
So this is Constitution Week. It was 236 years and 2 days ago that we began the process of signing our Constitution. And I wonder, as somebody who thinks about and works on constitutional questions every day, if you can help our students to understand why that is such an important milestone.
It is highly unusual, other than in a few countries that have embraced the common law, to have a constitution that stands the test of time the way that the U.S. Constitution has. It is a simple document that was carefully crafted. The words were carefully chosen, and as a result, it has remained timeless, it has remained flexible, it has remained revered, honored, and upheld. When I've been in other countries, particularly third world countries where governments are overthrown at 6-month intervals, where I've been in the Republic of Georgia, where they've had their constitution since 1995, but they've already made 36 changes to it, I have a much greater appreciation and a much greater respect for our founding fathers in the effort they made to develop a very simple framework of 3 equal branches of government with checks and balances. I believe that this is a fundamental foundation to democracy, and it's our job to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States, particularly against attacks to undermine our democracy that we have experienced in recent years.
In exception to your mother, which I certainly understand the deep influence of our parents and our mothers, who else, maybe a mentor at Georgia College or a class at Georgia College that you remember that really stuck with you and still stays with you today?
Oh, there are so many. Let's see where I want to start with that one. The College of Education was a wonderful opportunity. I had the opportunity to work with Dr. Lounsbury, Dr. Sahlstrom, Dr. Moody, and I just loved the fact that we got to spend so much time in the classroom. And I did my student teaching in Warner Robins High School during Watergate, and I had such tremendous support in being able to discuss open and honestly all of the events and on a daily basis in my class, and that was truly an amazing experience. In the political science department, Dr. Elowitz, Dr. Hemphill, Dr. Vinson, All of them had a tremendous influence on me. But I would have to say the most important influence comes from Dr. Lounsbury and Dr. Sahlstrom's belief in establishing the honors college, the honors program, because this was the first time that I was encouraged to be a leader and to do anything that I believed that I was capable of, and was supported in believing that I could do it. When I was in high school, my counselor actually told me I wasn't bright enough to go to college. He said I needed to get married, get secretarial skills, and that should be my life. My mother went to the school and basically ate him alive, would be how I would describe that, and say, "How dare you say that to my daughter?" So she made sure we sent him an invitation to my graduation from here, my graduation from Georgia State, and my law school graduation.
That's great.
Mothers have long memories,
Yes.
don't they?
Yes.
Thinking back to your college days, it sounds like you had some great professors, and I had some of those same professors when I was a student at Georgia College, and they continue to be transformative folks. I wonder if you can talk about, sounds like you really excelled in political science, foreign affairs, education. You had a pretty broad range of interests for a college student. I wonder if you can talk about things that you maybe enjoyed beyond just your classes, where maybe you flexed your muscles a little bit and learned a little bit more about yourself as a leader.
Well, I was not prepared to take on the administration of a court. I had no earthly idea what that was going to involve. So I had to learn things about budget and finance and going and meeting with commissioners and trying to get the money that I needed. And that certainly was beyond the scope of what I was planning to do. But you have to be able in your career to follow the money. And that became readily apparent when I began my work in the juvenile court. We got absolutely no support from anyone other than our county commissioners. And when I looked at other courts, they got grants, they had monies coming in from all kinds of sources. So I had to start studying and determining how to bring in additional funding to do the programs that we wanted to do. I actually worked a great deal with my Congressman, David Scott, and I was actually the first court in the state of Georgia to have a line item budget in the federal budget so that we could start an infant and toddler program. Because I do believe that if we don't concentrate on giving our children what they need in their earliest years, we have planted the seeds for them to have very serious problems with education, with relationships, with employment, and it's our job to plant the seeds for wellness. And we do that by helping them acquire language, by keeping them safe, by helping them have healthy, happy family relationships, and by getting the education that they need. They have to acquire language in those early years, and that allows them to learn self-regulation. One of the biggest frustrations and one of the areas that I've taken on in leadership is not to sanction children for their behavior and drive them out of the school system when it's children without words that use behavior as their language who get in trouble at school, and then we drive them away from the very thing they need the most. These are the children that have experienced abuse and neglect. Their brains don't develop in the same way. They don't have the language they need to express what they need. They don't have the ability to self-regulate. We have to ask where the behavior comes from. We provide the support services. We teach them words, and we basically redirect that behavior and give them the attention that they are looking for, but they're getting in a negative way. And that has been a passionate part of my leadership, is to make sure that our children's educational rights are honored and that they are not driven out of the school system because of the experiences that they've had in their lives.
I was thinking about, I know in the last 10, 15 years, a lot of special courts have come into being,
Yes.
and there are courts for mentally ill, there are courts for alcohol and drug abuse. Do you think those special courts are doing that purpose that you were just talking about, trying to help people instead of incarcerate them?
All right, let me talk about two different aspects of this business because it concerns me greatly the way things actually operate. And that's what's important about being broad in your studies, broad in your knowledge, and in pursuing things in your career that you need to know above and beyond what you're taught. I'm very much self-educated on mental illness and self-educated on substance use treatment and recovery. And I want to start by talking about the substance use recovery business. It's very much driven by what insurance will pay for as opposed to what people actually need. There's also a tendency in some programs to adopt any curriculum and call themselves a substance use program because we do not license and we do not monitor treatment programs. And it becomes our job when we have specialty courts to make sure that we are spending our resources wisely and that we are using programs that are evidence-based and that are going to lead to recovery. You cannot recover in 30 days and 21-day programs. It just doesn't happen that fast. You're talking about changing someone's lifestyle, their habits, their thinking. When you do something intensive like an accountability court, you have time to provide that support and to provide that encouragement. And my training as an accountability judge taught me to approach people in a very different way because I did not know before being an accountability judge that the vast majority of the parents that I was dealing with had experienced extreme trauma in terms of sexual abuse, physical abuse, homelessness, being raised by a mentally ill parent, and the hurt and the pain is what led them to substance use to be able to function. From working with the substance use, I learned that 2/3 of the people with our substance use issues were going to have a mental health diagnosis. If you treat only the substance use and you don't treat mental illness, then nothing changes. If you treat mental illness and you don't treat the self-medicating part, nothing changes. So you have to look at families, you have to look at individuals, you have to look at systems holistically, and you have to break down the silos of government, where you have public health here, behavioral health here, child welfare here, insurance through community health over here. You have to bring all these together to work together. And what I've learned about mental illness is the single most treatment that people with mental illness get is in jail. And that is terribly, horribly inhumane. When you have someone who's mentally ill and you jail them, they are going to deteriorate. It's guaranteed. I actually had a woman who was mentally ill who was in jail for a misdemeanor. The misdemeanor was dismissed. The information was not adequately communicated. She stayed in jail another 60 days in acute mental illness with no charges. And because she was in our court, we kept on and on and on until we could get her released and get her into some kind of a supportive program. For many years, we were taught that you could not do anything to help anyone with schizophrenia, but now we understand from the studies of the brain that depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder are all chemical imbalances, and that there are ways through talk therapy, through exercise, through diet, through medication, through intensive monitoring, that every one of these disorders can be served. We have some excellent programs in our state, but they're not widely available. I have seen parents with acute schizophrenia get what they need and be able to effectively parent, and I never thought that would happen in my lifetime. You are our future leaders, And you have an opportunity to move the work forward on substance use treatment, to move the work forward with regard to mental illness. And we can't dance around this and not call it what it is. We call it the Department of Behavioral Health. We call it mental health. But we don't recognize that we are actually dealing with a disease just as we would treat cancer or diabetes. This is a chemical imbalance of the brain. We shouldn't label, we shouldn't shame, we shouldn't blame. We should treat. And it is so hard. We put Band-Aids on gaping wounds, and then we wonder why we have all these shootings. And we wonder how children can become so isolated and can harm other people. And we wonder why it's not safe to go to church, to go to Walmart, to go to the grocery store, to go to the movies. People ask me, aren't you afraid to be that close to Russia? Aren't you afraid to be that close to Ukraine? No, I'm afraid to go to Walmart and the grocery store. I went to the Republic of Georgia. I could go anywhere night or day with my fiance or by myself. I was totally safe. Any hour. If I needed anything, everyone tried to help me. I was not unsafe in the Republic of Georgia. I'm unsafe here. I'm unsafe here because we're not doing what we need to do to provide what people need to be safe. You're going to be our future leaders, and we have to do better than what we're doing. There is no excuse for mental health services to be provided in jail and not at home.
Students, we want to hear from you, from our guests, but I have one, as we're preparing for you all to ask your questions, I have a question for you, Judge Walker. I wonder if you could tell us about success stories or where you see reforms being implemented in a good way. What are some of the innovations? What are some of the good examples that you can point to? Perhaps, where we're taking a whole of government approach, or these many sort of different agencies are working in tandem to serve the people who need to be served.
I have the opportunity to work with the state starting in 2017 on implementing something called Plan of Safe Care. Plan of Safe Care is how you deal with a family and an infant that has had substance use exposure prior to birth and is born positive and is affected by the substance use. When I started this work and got the federal line item for the infant toddler courts, they only wanted me to work with families in foster care and babies in foster care, and I'm going, wait. We've already done a removal. What happens when you have a mother who's shamed and blamed and embarrassed with her substance use is she doesn't go and get prenatal care. And then when she goes into labor, she goes to the emergency room and she goes to whatever hospital she happens to be in, and they're not necessarily equipped for dealing with children who are born substance exposed. So that means there's an immediate separation. The mother's in the hospital where she went, but the child's been life-flighted to a NICU unit in another place. And then the state becomes involved, and what happens for those parents is that it's very hard to come back and to come into your child's life, to establish that bond, and to get reunited with that child. It's easier to walk into the depths of your addiction and continue to numb your pain until you're dead. I wanted to do something different when I learned about this Plan of Safe Care. I wanted to give parents an opportunity to come forward during pregnancy and get a plan to help them get into medical insurance, medical care, but also to get into treatment and to build a support system prior to the birth of the child. I also wanted them to have the opportunity to go to residential centers and to be able to live with their babies and not do the separation. This was bold, it was big, and I got a lot of pushback, but I kept at it until it happened. And then the other piece of that I want to make sure you understand, we have residential treatment where mothers can stay with their babies. We have no residential treatment where men can stay with their children. Not one place in the state of Georgia, not one. When both parents have substance use issues, we have no place where families can stay together and be treated together. But the reality is they love each other. They're bonded to each other. We need to deal with them as a unit. The other thing that I would say to you is that it's very important that we do workforce development. We don't have career paths in the mental health field where people stay and they are adequately compensated. We used to have good career paths in education, and those have been deteriorated by budget issues, and now we struggle with having teachers. And we don't have what we need in terms of a career path in social work, where we have consistent one face throughout the case to do the work that we do. So I think this is another area that your leadership can address in making sure that we have clear public service career paths where people can enjoy a quality of life, but the satisfaction of changing lives matters. As to a success story, I'm going to repeat the one that I shared earlier today because it's really important. I had a woman military veteran who came into my court because her baby was born positive for methamphetamines. It was her 4th child. She had served in Iraq and she had been assigned to the mortuary, and her job was to put bodies and body parts into body bags. She could not eat meat when she returned to the United States because raw meat looked like the bodies that she had placed in the bags. She had their first 2 children in a very violent relationship, and those 2 children were twins with autism. She had a 3rd child. 3rd child also had special needs. And she was literally overwhelmed between her post-traumatic stress, the domestic violence, and 3 special needs children. She began using drugs. She came to our court, and we were able to keep she and the baby together in residential treatment. She completed residential treatment. She got her children back. She was doing really well. I do not know what her trigger was that led to a relapse, but she nearly died. And during this period of time when she was on a coma, I was actually working with the father of 2 of the children who had also been in recovery but had maintained his recovery on his ability to adopt and care for all of the children, because I did not want siblings to be separated. That sibling relationship is incredibly important. So I wanted to make sure that those siblings got the opportunity to stay together. She did recover from her coma. She entered treatment again. And because of the degree of trauma she had experienced in her life with the military service, with the domestic violence, and 2/3 of your victims of domestic violence are also going to experience sexual assault in that relationship, but they don't tell us that. We didn't really learn about that till her 2nd relapse. So our job was to provide all the services around her, and she was able to reunite with her children. She's had a 5th child, and it is a healthy child, a child born free of any substances. And those 2 twin boys are getting honors despite their autism diagnoses, because we got them all connected into those early services. We got all the early services wrapped around all of the children's special needs. And this family is happy, healthy, thriving, and living on the coast of Georgia and staying in touch with me every week. And it's truly remarkable to be able to change lives. And whatever field you choose, whatever volunteer work you do, you always have the opportunity to change lives by reaching out. If you've never been trained in suicide prevention, it's really important, particularly while you're here in college. Our leading causes of death for our children are unsafe sleep, motor vehicle accidents, but believe it or not, suicide is right up there in the top 3. The youngest child under my jurisdiction to commit suicide or die by suicide, because we're moving away from commit suicide. It's die by suicide. And that child was only 9 years old. So we have to understand the stress that our young people live under. And I really encourage you to get that training because you can save someone's life. It only takes asking the right questions. And I've been fortunate on many occasions to ask the right questions and get people in the right places at the right times. But there's also been times when I didn't pick up on it and where I've lost very dear friends and parents and children, particularly when I was teaching high school, because we set such high expectations for our children and don't understand the stress that we're putting them under. And it's okay to fail. We learn from our failures, we grow from our failures. We shouldn't die from our failures. So those are the things that I would share with you about what's important.
You want to ask?
To our guests, I wonder what questions you have for Judge Walker. If you have a question, we have a microphone right here. Or if the microphone is too far, say your question in a big voice and I will repeat it. Who has a question for Judge Walker? Yes. Okay.
So I had a really great opportunity this past summer to intern for a DA and really experience accountability court. So I was just a little bit curious if you could explain kind of your process when determining someone's placement in the different accountability courts, like mental health, veterans, and substance abuse, just a little bit into your process.
Can you help paraphrase
Yeah.
because I have trouble hearing?
How you help to place somebody? Is that what you said?
Like your process.
Your process for
Okay,
placing.
that's a great question. All right.
Thank you, Emily.
In the juvenile court, we have an obligation under federal law to make reasonable efforts to avoid removal to foster care. And what that means is that the judge is the gatekeeper and decides where children sleep. And that's a real simple term that I use, especially when I'm working in the elementary schools to try to explain to them about what my job is. In custody cases between parents, I decide which parent they sleep with. In cases where there's been abuse and neglect, I decide where they're going to sleep. And in cases where they've gotten in trouble with the law, I decide where they're going to sleep. So that's a real simple concept for the children to be able to understand. But reasonable efforts to avoid removal to foster care means that I have to ask the caseworkers a lot of questions about what they are doing to keep from bringing a child into foster care. It was very common for parents to be arrested together, children to be in the car, and the caseworker to simply call me on the way to the jail and say, "I'm asking for intake, the parents are being arrested." I said, "Who have you talked to?" "Nobody." "No. You need to go to the jail, interview the parents. I need to know who is the grandparents, aunts and uncles, cousins, babysitters, neighbors." Our job is to keep children with people they know. Can you imagine somebody picking you up at the police department and taking you to a total stranger when you've just seen both of your parents handcuffed? The trauma that we do in doing that it makes it worse for children. So we have an obligation to do a complete and thorough investigation before we do the removal to foster care. Then when we get into the situation of the fact that we have one parent, but we don't know the name or the location of the second parent, and the first parent's not always forthcoming with that information. I've had many situations where the state just simply ignores that there's a father, and I say, no. There's an obligation for us to see any connection this child has. So I need the father's name, and I need to know what they've done in terms of being involved in the life of the child. And even when the mother tells me the father's totally out of the picture, we have to have a situation where the child's not in the presence of the mother, and we just ask, "Tell me about your dad." Sometimes they know the full name, the phone number, and the address. And that's really important information that could easily be lost if we don't do our jobs. When we get to the situation where there are multiple people in the family that can take the child, I have to make the decision what's the best choice. What are people's work schedules? What's their proximity to the parents? Can the child go to the same school? Can the child go to the same doctor or the same dentist? Can they go to their ball practice? Can they go to their church? There are many factors in making those decisions. Are there religious beliefs? Are there medical issues? So it's a very lengthy process of gathering the information and making the very best decision. We are lucky because our state gives us 26 factors to consider as to the best interests of a child. But when I go to the Constitution of the Republic of Georgia, when I look at their Rights of Children Code, it says placement is made in the best interest of the children, but doesn't define it. So what I learned was that caseworkers believe the best interest of the child is staying away from the family. The lawyers believe the best interest of the child is getting that child home, and so the caseworkers won't work with the lawyers, and the lawyers won't work with the caseworkers. And then the judge has a whole different idea of what's in the best interest of the child, but yet they don't communicate with one another about their perceptions of best interests of the children. So we're a long way from where they are in that we look at every single factor in making a decision about placement of children, and that placement has to be the best possible placement. Probably one of the most challenging ones for me was a baby where we'd done a removal with substance use. The mother was to go to treatment on Monday. She overdosed in her final party on Sunday and died. The father died by suicide on the following Friday because he could not cope with the loss of custody of a child and the loss of custody of his partner. And I had both families in the courtroom, both families vying for custody of this baby. And I said to them, I will make a decision, but my decision is not always going to be exactly what's needed. So, because I'm making a guess about what I think about your different families, your different options. So here's what I'm asking you to do. I'm asking you to meet as a family, two families together, but as one family for one child, and give me 3 options. And then you can present to me what those options are that you think as families are best, and I will choose. So I adjourn the case. I give them several weeks. I bring them back in. I said, what are my 3 choices? Judge, we don't need you. We've made a decision. We know what we need to do. We know who's best for this child, and each of us can support that family. And I did not have to do that. When families can solve their own problems, we are better off because we are making an educated guess based upon experience. We are predicting what people are going to do based upon their past. But it's not always the right decision. It's not always what's best for the child. And we have to be more trusting of our families to make those decisions. And that was something that I learned from that experience, is simply giving them time to grieve, giving them time to think, giving them time to talk, and giving them time to build a partnership. And they've done really well.
It's a great story.
I'm afraid we're very nearly out of time. But Judge Walker, I wonder if you have any parting words or comments for our students. Perhaps think back to when you were in these chairs as a Georgia College student. What advice would you give, particularly to our students?
The best advice that I can give you is that your children are only with you for 18 years before they leave and become adults. And those are the most important 18 years of your life, is to invest in them and invest in them wisely. You have plenty of years for your career, and you have to strike a balance between your children and your career. My second piece is to talk about your career. If it's Sunday night and you are dreading going to bed and you're dreading getting up and you're dreading going to work, that's a problem. You're not in the right job. If you're watching the clock and time is dragging, you are not in the right job. If you come home and you are utterly drained and you cannot do a single thing that brings you joy in your life, you're in the wrong job. Get out, quit, do something else. Doesn't matter what you do, but you are not fulfilling the purpose of your life. If you look forward to going to work and you suddenly are at the end of the day and you don't even know where the time went or what you did with it, and you go home and you have the energy to cook, to exercise, to visit with your friends, to go do fun things, you are in the right place doing the right thing. And change your life until you feel that satisfaction. Because there is nothing better than doing what you love and loving what you do. I have had the opportunity to take my education background, my law background, and do what I love, which is serve families, serve children, and change lives. And I cannot tell you how fulfilling it is to get those calls, to get those letters, to get those messages that people want to tell me how well they're doing and how much they appreciate the investment that we made in them, in being kind to them, in being supportive of them, and encouraging them, and helping them become what they could be. And reaching your potential is your job to determine what your very best skills are, your very best talents, and your passion. I'm on my 4th career. You're not going to have one. You're going to have many. And love them all. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge Walker.
That's amazing.
Well, of course, we want to thank Judge Walker for being with us. I encourage you, if you don't have a copy already, download our ideas bulletin at bulletin.leadcreatively.org, or you can scan that QR code, and it profiles and shares some of the wonderful speakers we've had in our Usery Forum over the past year. And for more ideas like these, I also want to remind you of some wonderful opportunities, some upcoming events. We're hosting virtually the Secretary General of the European Parliament, His Excellency Klaus Welle. That is next week on September 25th. That will be virtual. Students, we have a virtual information session about our study abroad program based at the European Parliament in Strasbourg. That is on September 27th. You're welcome to join that. We can answer all of your questions. And then next month on October 16th, we're hosting our second in our Usery series for this term, and it will feature Mrs. Jane Kidd, who is our Alex Gregory Distinguished Fellow and Leader in Residence at Georgia College. So I encourage you to take part in all of those. You can go to leadcreatively.org and get registered. Likewise, please continue the conversation using the hashtag #ForThePublicGood, and you can follow us online at Lead Creatively. With that said, please give another round of applause and thanks to our distinguished presenter, Judge Peggy Walker.
Thank you.
Thank you, Judge Walker. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, amazing.